Hall. They really did take good care of this place, and it's noted. Thanks to Eric. He's also a city alderman for coming out. But anyways, thank you guys. Dave Vance, typically he calls and makes sure, or Mr. Jan Black does, that he calls and makes sure that they use our restaurant a lot for the Republican meeting. And when he called me this time, I said, nothing, Cumberland City doesn't get a whole lot. Jay Reedy is closer to Cumberland City. Maybe we could have a better turnout for our state representative to stop by and meet him, talk to him, hear his ideas if we moved into Cumberland City. And Cumberland City is kind of on an island, to be honest. It really is. They should be. They're part of Stewart County, just like Leatherwood and Indian Mountain is, but a lot of times we think of them and they're lost down here. But it was my idea that I just wanted Cumberland City to know that you're not lost. Just because you haven't been supported in the last 4 years doesn't mean you're not lost. And we want to get back down here, make sure you know that you're a part of Stewart County. And that's why I asked these guys to come down here, and state representatives here. Thank you for welcoming them, and hope you got enough to eat. Take plates with you, and thanks for everybody for coming out.
At this time, I'd like to have you join me in for the music.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Representative Jay Reedy, Stewart County representative for the state of Tennessee.
And of course, I'm pretty excited as a farmer that we end up using this building quite a lot for our cattle meetings and all of that. And of course, one gentleman here was saying, I remember a number of years ago that you made keys for my vehicle, so yes, I am still a locksmith. After 19 years, and I guess at that time, Pam, I always appreciated my time spent at the wallboard plant. And I was just telling the story about, I worked there for 13 years before I got elected. And it was one night, 12-hour shifts, midnight shift. Of course, what do you have to do? Cut up on the company radios, right? And so it was a hot day. We got talking, and I said, I'm thinking about running for state representative. And one of the floor guys, he holds up his hand and says, I'll give you $100 if you do. By 7 o'clock that night, when I walked out, there was employees lined up, handing cash and checks and saying, go run. We want you. And it was the same thing at the little old ladies in church. And you know a lot of people that are good conservative Democrats. And that's where I told the little old ladies there, and they said, well, we're going to vote for you. And I said, well, if you're going to vote for me, you're going to have to pull the Republican ticket. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I'm not sure how they do it in Stewart County, but my first time, maybe I should back up and tell you how I got here, because I'm an Idaho farm boy. But I go to vote at Houston County, and the little old lady sitting there says, how do you vote? I said, ma'am, she said, how do you vote? I said, I don't understand what you say. She said, you don't have to say it. You can just point to a piece of paper that said Democrat or Republican. And I said, I vote Republican. And their head snapped up in there. And as I left, this little old man said, son, you don't let that, don't tell many people around here you're Republican. It hurts your business and your family and everything else. It's like, now wait a minute. I'm a Christian. Do I supposed to hide the fact that I'm a Christian as well? Absolutely not. So I really want to start off and ask a question. There's 3 questions. Where did you come from? Where are you going? And how are you going to get there? And of course, we know the political climate right now is very hateful. I mean, I was asked to say a prayer in front of the city council for Aaron, and the newspaper reporter put my prayer in the newspaper. There is hateful chaos between family members and friends that I pray to God after the election's over, we'll come back, big family and friends. And now I'm going to preach to you for a minute, but I'm an Idaho farm boy. I joined the Army, graduated Fayette High School, joined the Army, traveled the world, ended up at Fort Campbell. And it was by accident that I got to Fort Campbell. A lot of people still don't know this, but December of 1985, there was the plane crash in Gander that killed 248 soldiers. My stepfather was on that plane. So at the time, I was stationed in Fort Holmes, Louisiana. Compassionate reassignment, of course, with Red Cross contacted my commander. I came up, was with the family, the funeral. Matter of fact, it was the first president that I ever got to vote for was President Reagan. Now, what was cool, but it was sad because of the circumstances that the president and the first lady met with us out on the airfield at Fort Campbell. So I did get to meet the president that I voted for the first time in my life. So that was pretty exciting. But it was through that tragedy that you would probably have never met Jay Reedy. So I think things happen for a reason. Well, what happened is I got out, I was enlisted. My 1 year younger brother said, Jay, you know, with you being prior service, if you come to Austin P, go to school with me in ROTC, in 2 years we can be commissioned as reserve officers together. So I did. Now, leading up to that, I had to have a 4-year degree before I could go do anything active duty as an officer. I was a company executive officer with the 100th Training Division in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Who they are is, we have the drill sergeants and tankers. So the battlefield tanks, we would train individuals on the battlefield tanks. If we go to war, Fort Knox gets activated, the 100th Training Division in Kentucky goes over, takes over Fort Knox, and now you get the picture. Well, me going to Austin P as an ag student, small town farm boy, people said, what do you want to major in? And I said, agriculture. They said, well, there's no future in that. That's where my heart and my love is at. And it served me very well as a cattle farmer. But my 8 years of service to the state, I've been on the agriculture today. And I'm happy to be there. It's working with Farm Bureau, with farmers, everything else was really cool. Now, what got me to Houston County? Well, I met this young lady, the last name is Coleman, so if you know any of the Colemans in Houston County, you saw me at the home center. And our senior year, as both ag students, we started today. Now, you know the rest of the story. So, 3 kids went through the public school system. The third one's going to Austin P now, so we're basically an Austin P family. Now, here is where I'm going to preach to you because I think it's important. In the Old Testament, the book of Job, we know where Satan came from. But here in the first book of Job, God says, Satan, where have you been? What have you been up to? I'm going back and forth upon the earth. Now, if you go to the New Testament, Timothy is where you find out is Satan is going back and forth upon the earth, finding whom he can devour. He could be here with us right now. The book of James, first chapter, I get mixed up, 18th and 19th verse is, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So as soon to be your new state representative, that's what I follow when I get to Nashville. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. I'm going to hear you out, have a cordial conversation, and find out what's best, not only for House District 74, but the state of Tennessee. My 8 years in office, I tell my staff, if somebody calls on that phone, I don't care if they're from Cumberland City or Nashville, Tennessee, if they're asking for help, we're going to help them. We don't hand them off to somebody else. Because if you're a Tennessean, you're one of my constituents. It's just the way I've always believed it. But in finding direction in the way that we go, I brought with me, now everybody has a cell phone that's got a GPS on there. Well, this is a lensatic compass. If you don't know what it is, it's stuff that we learned how to use in the military. You use a compass and you use the map. Of course, my time spent in Germany, I was talking to Dave earlier, I was stationed there. We had the nuclear missiles early 80s, aimed at Russia 24 hours a day. If I had a driver's license, I could drive a quarter ton, which was the old Jeep, up to an M68 352 and max, which is 60 ton. I was licensed. I like to drive. I'm licensed for everything. Well, they found out I could read a map and I could drive a vehicle. They gave me a Jeep and I became a courier on what was, it was a training exercise called Able Archer. And in Able Archer, the Russians were they were spying on us, and that's when they finally found out, which helped with the wall coming down and the nuclear arms race. There was the reduction treaty that we went through. But anyway, direction in your life, it's known as a GM angle. So training and reading a map at Fort Campbell, the GM angle is right around plus or minus 1 degree. But if you look at my compass, I found some clear fingernail polish, and I had training to do at Fort Lewis. So on Fort Lewis, whenever I pulled out my compass, I had to know off of an inclination diagram what was the GM angle for Washington State. And here it reminds me, and of course the GM angle is grid north or magnetic north. Okay, you follow me on that. So you could be looking at a map, but the magnetic force of the Earth will take you off, and I had to take minus 21 degrees away from what I was reading in order for me to get from point A to point B. Why do I bring this up? What leads your life? Where are you going? You can be 1 degree off in 10 feet or 100 feet or 1,000 feet, still hit your destination. But if you're 1 degree off in your life, then maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe we all fight our demons in life. The drugs, the alcohol, not necessarily us taking it, but watching out for our kids right now. It is shameful, the southern border, the fentanyl that's coming into our country. My wife, yes, she's still a school teacher, but watching the teachers, she'll talk about these kids that are dying from Houston County, first time maybe just trying these drugs out that are laced with fentanyl. Good kids with a bright future, they're gone. Somehow, some way, the governor has sent National Guard troops from Tennessee down there to help protect the southern border because all states are now a border state. But getting back to the idea, what is your compass? What is your moral compass? And what are you going with that? How are you going to get there? A big part of it is, as much as you love or hate, and I tell people at times, the more I learn about government, the more I hate it. So, Jay, part of it. I get that. Hopefully I'm one of the good guys trying to make a difference in everybody's life. So the forces of good and evil are around us. Now, when Jesus Christ came to the earth as a man, and then when he left, of course, as he ascended to heaven, who did he leave behind? We got the Holy Ghost. Okay? So we have to do some prayer. And the reason I bring this up, it was one day, Joe Clyde Daniels situation in Dixon County. This little old lady asked me to come over, and I was rekeying this rental house that she had. And the whole time she's following me, talking about how could God let that happen to a little boy? And you always try to be nice. I mean, or at least I try to be nice. Finally, I can take it. I said, man, who's in control of this world? And of course, she was blaming God. There's health issues in our daily lives that we have to put up with. Bad things happen to good people. All right? I don't have the answer for it. But I finally said, Satan is on this earth with us right now. And the more you lean towards being a good person or a Christian, the harder he's going to come after. We can talk about salvation later, but I'm not going to go that direction. But the point is, in the politics that we see going on right now, and that's what I said earlier, is family against family, and friends against friends. There are people that are actually giving up on their religion and sticking to politics. And this is the way that's it. It's like, wait a minute. Christian first, conservative second, and I'm a Republican. I grew up as a Republican in the state of Iowa. Now, I know it's not so red anymore. So then it was earlier, it's the mayor's race. Of course, I come back out, and now I've been listed as a rhino. How many of you that are politically astute have been called a rhino in this room right now?
Only by the same person as you have.
Well, it's, over my 8 years, I've been told I was too Christian, I was too conservative, and that I'm a rhino. Okay, if I mention the American Conservative Union, or CPAC, who in here knows who I'm talking about? Okay, so CPAC, Mark Green, he goes there and speaks about it every year. Matt Schlapp, and what they do is, after an election cycle or a year, they will take legislation and evaluate that legislation to find out who is conservative or who is not. So in 2020, I was the second most conservative Republican in the state of Tennessee. Number one was Justin Lafferty out of Knoxville. And so when people come out and say, well, Reedy's a rhino, it's like, please give me a definition. If you're not familiar with the name rhino, it's a Republican in name only. And I said, okay, I guess I'm confused. That bothered me to a point. All right. And then the Americans for Prosperity just come out and sent me a text message and said, we want to let you know on your legislative scorecard for just this past year, you're the number one most conservative legislator still serving in the state of Tennessee. So, okay. And so when I get some folks out of Dayton County or out of Stewart County that starts calling me rhino, it's like, I give up. I mean, what does it really mean? So I've got a couple more prompts. And of course, quotes from President Reagan, governing principles. I was given this by Speaker Beth Harlow January 13, 2015, right after I got elected. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll just go and say, we will follow Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment to never speak ill of another republic. What are we doing now? Forgetting our religion and thinking of politics, and if you don't agree with me, you're going to call me names or disassociate yourself with me or just whatever. So the politics of the early 80s, and then I wrote off this quote. The person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. So whenever you come with a neighbor or a family member or friend and you disagree on a certain subject, it's no sense going to war over that one issue or that 20%. Agree with the 80%. And that's what's bothering me right now. We cannot have a cordial conversation. It was about 4 years ago, what happened in Washington, D.C.? And I said, whatever happens in Washington, D.C. will finally come down to the states. And it has. And that's why I was talking to Mark Green. And of course, the riot that took place in Washington, D.C., my cell phone rings, and I pull it out. And Mark Green's calling me. I said, God bless you, Mark Green, for wanting to be in Washington, D.C. And he said, Jay, I'm just reaching out to you to let everybody know if they're concerned about me. I'm safe, I'm fine, everything's good. So, okay, good deal. But at the same time, when he called, I said, Mark, you being in the military, being in the military, I said, it'll come out that Antifa and Black Lives Matter are the ringleaders. And that's stupid stuff. The January 6th stuff is on live nightly news proceedings going on right now. There's the left side and the right side explaining what took place, but really in the center there's some kind of truth. We got to sort through that. I'm not on social media. I gave that up. It was after that election. I mean, I've been censored. I've had posts taken down. I started a YouTube channel to get information out to folks like you, the State Rep Jay Reedy. YouTube took my channel down the first time I said something about the Second Amendment rights, and they won't let me back on. And I said, so much for our First Amendment rights, right? Getting information out. So that's another challenge that we're fighting with. But sure enough, it come out, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and Trump here. Yeah. We've got some young people or people that fall right into the crowd. They follow the crowd. If they go off the cliff, they're going to go with them. But that's my point in this little talk here is sometimes we got to back up and think. And it's the same thing I've told my kids their whole life. I said, just because it's on the internet, just because it's on social media, doesn't make it the gospel truth. Always ask the question, there's two sides to every story. Get them both before you pass judgment. Freshman members come into the house, and I'll just say this, I'll give you some advice, it's free, take it or leave it. Whatever is happening in your district, in the state, don't jump right in with them on social media and be part of the discussion. In about 24 hours, you're going to find out 9 times out of 10, you were wrong. You were wrong. So you got to just cool your jets, think about this, sleep on it, hopefully, before you make decisions. And it's the same thing that we have to do as House and Senate members when we're working on legislation. I rely heavily upon lobbyists. Now, in my time in office, I figured out the lobbyists that I can trust and those that I can't. But I use them for information. My office staff is one, unless I get an injury. And Jennifer, if you ever call my office, you'll love Jennifer. She's been with me about 5.5 years. And that's what I told her. I said, if somebody calls, they're a constituent. They live in the state of Tennessee. Let's take care of it. But what's interesting, there are just the two of us, and I cannot gather all the information that you may be seeing running around the news, the media, and everything else, especially on a piece of legislation, because I don't sit on every committee. And sometimes I don't hear that piece of legislation until it's just ready to hit the House floor and we're getting ready to take a vote on it. And so that's where I use folks like you. You stay in touch with me. If something concerns you, contact my office. I'll take a glance at it, see if it's been put on notice, if it's been heard in the first committee. Normally, if it's the first 2 committees that I do not sit on, I'll say, if it passes that second committee, let me know. Now, at the same time, when legislation is passing through, it can be amended. Something that would look beautiful and would be a rising star could be garbage just as soon as they amend that out. And so that's what I've got to pay attention. When finally that piece of legislation, when it's moving in the House and the Senate, looks like it's gaining traction, that's when I need to decide who's doing what with that piece of legislation, because it could be given a poison pill to make it bad, but a lot of men could die. So our numbers are limited. Each year, about 1,500 bills are filed, but we only hear about 500 of them. Now, I want to take questions here in a few minutes, but earlier this week, Wednesday, I am the vice chairman of the House Government Operations Committee. And this was we had our joint meeting on Wednesday, so I brought my notepad with me. Somebody asked me something about what's being done in education, and new rules were being made concerning CRT, critical race theory, on how we're going to handle our schools in the state of Tennessee. So I'm the vice chairman of that committee, which is pretty cool, actually. I was asked to testify in front of the joint government operations. Now, joint government operations is both House and Senate members sit on that committee. So when we're in session from January till March, April, we only have just the House Government Operations Committee, and then every month for the rest of the year. So they call us part-time politicians. Well, it's nothing part-time, it's about doing it. I go to Nashville every month, a couple times every month. But what does Government Operations Committee do for the state of Tennessee? Shortly after I got elected, the decision was made that the Joint Operations Committee would have every agency or state department in the state of Tennessee, if they were going to increase fees on our citizens for licenses, professional license, barber license, whatever, or if there's an agency that's going to change rules that we're going to have to live with, they have to come to the Government Operations Committee for permission. Okay? Then that's when we hash it out until the wrong ones. And back to the drawing board, and it's interesting, sometimes they just drop their rules and say, never mind. Because they know we're going to oppose it. So on this particular meeting date, the first item on the agenda was East Tennessee State University Public Records. It's how do you go about going to a university and there's open records, and there's a process in getting it. And so a big thing now is even at Austin Peay, if you wanted to looking for something in their record, you can go in with your cell phone, snap a picture of the paper, it won't cost you anything, but they need to allow you to do that. That was the first time. The second thing is Tennessee Department of Corrections, this County Correctional Incentives Program, was a big thing. Our state pins and what the officers were making as a salary was very low. So there was a high turnover rate, and so this was talking about the pay increase, but not only the pay increase, also going to the counties. If we are housing felons, it should be going to a state pen. When we're housing them in the sheriff's department, they're getting additional pay to our county jails, which is important. Because we're going broke housing so many inmates, it should not be, it should be held state or federally, but we're incarcerating them locally, still trying to move them out of our system. The third thing comes from the Department of Agriculture about chronic wasting disease in deer. They were not ready, so they withdrew the current rules instead of working on chronic wasting disease because they're working with TWRA on that same issue. Chronic wasting disease has been around the United States since the 50s, the 60s, out in Colorado. It was really prevalent out west. Here a couple of years ago, it's finally made its way to Tennessee, so we're having that discussion now. It's a prion, it's a protein, it gets in deer. You really don't know they have it until they're dead and if they do the samples. So look at it if you're more interested in chronic wasting disease. Number 4 was very interesting, had to do with our local sawmills. Now, some cities, counties set up codes, building codes. So if they were going to build this garage, you had to have different standards on lumber and grades of lumber in order to build it for safety. Some places, my farm, if I build this sawmill lumber all the time, building barn sheds, just whatever, I do it. But then the conversation finally come out, the code for stopping these local sawmills where you can go to your friend's sawmill, pick up what you need. What they're doing, this is permissive, so in other words, the sawyer that works at that sawmill now can go to the state, take a course, and be able to grade this lumber, and when they're authorized to put their stamp graded, they can sell you a building package deal, and you can build your house, your shop, your commercial business, or whatever. So that's brand new coming out. Number 5, prohibited concepts in instruction. Ready for a race there. And then the last thing was about kin care waivers, and I'm not going to get into that, but what I want to do is talk about the rules that came out for education. So we look at the abstract. It says, if the commissioner determines that the LEA or public charter school knowingly violates Tennessee Code annotated 49-6-1019, the department shall withhold the payment of state funds scheduled to be distributed to the LEA or public charter school until the requirements of the corrective action plan have been met. The amount of state funds to be withheld shall be as follows. I won't read through there, but there's 2%, 4%, all the way up to 6%. But in the rules, prohibited concepts. It's just about a page and a quarter. I won't read them. I'll read a couple to give you an idea of what we're talking about. One race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. We're not going to put up with that stuff in school. Being an individual by virtue of an individual's race or sex is inherently privileged, racist, sexist, or oppressed, whether consciously or subconsciously. So the Democrats voted against this rule change in the Government Operations Committee, and I'm sure you know why. They got their agenda. And we have the supermajority in the state of Tennessee. If the Democrats pass anything, it's because we, the Republicans, allow them to do so. I'll say that there's some good conservative Democrats still serving in the State House and the Senate that come up with some good ideas. Now, we could certainly do what they did to us before we were in the supermajority, is, Dave, I'm gonna kill your bill, because I got a new House member that needs it, that's a Democrat, so you as a Republican, you can't have it. They give that crap to the past, and then of course, the Speaker of the House and the leadership in the House, we were talking about that, so we're not gonna do that with the Democrat. We're not gonna play that game. So I'm going to stop right there and answer some questions. I'm sure you got a bunch of them. Go ahead. Second Amendment, there's the TFA, help me with the date. The TFA.
August 2nd is the Visitor Center, 7 o'clock. John Harris is the president, founder of the Tennessee Fire Association. He's speaking, he's going to be there as well. If you want to know what's going on in gun laws in Tennessee, that's a good need to be at.
Yes. We've come a long way since I've been in office, but we've got a long ways to go. It was 2 years ago at the Baptist Church, I shared the stage with John Harris. There was a huge crowd. It was a good conversation talking about what's going on, not only at the state level, but at the federal level, and they're trying to keep the federal folks out of Tennessee's business. That's the 10th Amendment, 10th Amendment rights. If it's not the federal government's business, they need to stay home.
We have a question on the thing with
Yes.
education. So it's all going to hinge on Penny, not where the Penny swings. I mean, it's going to be all her ballpark or what, as far as figuring out if something's been violated?
There is a process. Yeah, so it's, in other words, we have told her now keep in mind, love or hate Penny Schwinn, we're not, just like the governor, we're not gonna have them forever. And it's gonna change. Just like the Attorney General. Attorney General Slattery, I didn't care much for the man until the last year and a half, because he started standing up for our rights, this weaponizing of COVID, states' rights. He's joined with other attorney generals across the state, and one of them is our Second Amendment rights, and saying, we as the state of Tennessee, we will not spend any money to enforce federal law when it comes to our Second Amendment rights. In other words, if the FBI come knocking on your door, they're knocking on your door by themselves. There won't be any state troopers or local law enforcement with them. We're not going to spend that money. And of course, our sheriffs are constitutional officers. They must not only uphold the United States Constitution, like us, but also the state's Constitution. Now, you're not seeing them yet because of voting going on for the August primary for us for local elections. But on the November ballot, there's going to be constitutional amendments there that you get to look at and vote on. Okay? I'm the chair for vote yes on one, and what that is putting into our state constitution, making it a right to work state. Because we have the right to work. We should not be governed by unions. No, we shouldn't have to put up with all of that. Now, there was another constitutional amendment I had with Senator Mark Cody. In our state's constitution, way back when, if you were a preacher, a minister, a pastor, you could not serve as a state representative or a state senator. The Supreme Court of the state of Tennessee says that's unconstitutional. So Senator Mark Cody and I, we decided, let's wait up Tennessee's constitution, take that out. Real quickly, I'll explain. It's not easy to amend the federal constitution, let alone the state constitution. Now, it takes 4 years. It takes 2 sessions. So in other words, I had to present that constitutional amendment 4 years ago. It makes it through the committee system. It makes it to the House floor. It has to be read 4 times. When it's on the 4th time, then it's finally voted on. And then it has to come back the next year, which I just brought it back. Senator Cody passed it for the first half of the 112th session, and I took care of it this year. And so that puts it on the ballot whenever the governor's name is on the ballot. So come November, those are the 2 constitutional amendments I'm sure of. It seems like there's 4 of them. I don't recall what the others are. Dave, you have a question? Yes, sir.
Some people like how like this way
So the question is the Biden administration dropping off illegals under the cover of darkness in the state of Tennessee? We all know, yes, it is. Yes, they are. Our two U.S. senators are working on that. Of course, I have the availability to contact either or both. And when it was first brought up, we had a meeting in Clarksville. Mark Green was working on it, as well as the governor, because it was in 1981. It was called the Wilson Fish Act. It was at the federal level, Wilson Fish Act. So if you want to look at it, Idaho was one of the states, Tennessee was one of the states. There was 13 states that said, we do not want any foreign, any refugees, any whatever. Well, lo and behold, the federal government passed the Wilson Fish Act and said, we're going to send, by federal law, to your state, whoever we think that we ought to. And you don't have a say-so about it, and it's not costing your state anything, so you don't have any say-so. 4 years ago, we fought that in the House. We were saying, wait a minute, these people that are not wanted here, we don't know where they're coming from, we don't know where they're going, where the federal government is putting them. And yes, your tax dollars were taken care of through the health system, through the English is the second language funding that we put in our education system, teaching these people how to speak English. Yeah, and we proved that. And it was proved in the document that the federal government wasn't keeping up their end of the bargain, because every year they were supposed to report to us that they were doing this.
So the report
It has never been given.
so we have no clue what the law is.
No. So as far as, and I don't want to dwell on the Kurds. Have you heard about the Kurds in the news? They are good people. I get that, but they're good people. But Tennesseans need to know this stuff. I mean, maybe you don't care, but when the federal government says they're going to give us information to the state, when you tell somebody you're going to do something, let's do it, especially if it's part of the law. So getting back to your question, yes, across the nation, I'm trying to remember the night of the news on how many, what did they say, it's this year up towards, they couldn't count it. They've got the documented ones that have been stopped and processed, and doing a lousy computer system of it because a lot of the records are lost. We don't have any idea the plane ticket or the bus ticket where we sent these people out because something happened to the database. But already this year, 3 million people that are accounted for. Let's talk about the state of Vermont. How many people exist in the state of Vermont? 700,000. What is 3 million people due to our country? And I'm not saying that they're all bad. But however, what disease is coming across our southern border? What type of gang members do you I don't remember the name of the gang we found here in Tennessee. MS-13, yeah. So it's these gangs. Also, you may not have remembered this. It was 5 years ago. It was against sanctuary cities. I had to do Mark Green had been said, and it was, we were not going to let any city, county set up a sanctuary city. Now, what is a sanctuary city? Now, when I started pushing the bill, I was trying to find out exactly what happens to our sheriff's departments and what control do we have as a state, okay? Because you've got your border agents, your ICE agents. From what I understand, we only have 2 in the state of Tennessee. Now, your immigration customs agents have a heavy responsibility, but how long does it take you to get from one end of the state to another? Long one. Okay. So, trying to figure out the process and discussing this bill, because I know Nashville was harboring felon, illegal aliens and protecting them from law enforcement. So I got John Peterson, Sheriff of Montgomery County, on the phone. I didn't lead in with what I was talking about or anything. I said, if the campus police in Austin Peay arrest somebody, what do they do with that person? Well, they bring them over and book them. And they run off their name, their social security number, or some kind of identification. And so I said, okay, what if the person is here illegally? And then they got a nationwide database. And in that database, they look to get a hit. So if Jay Reedy's name was on there, and I'm here illegally with a felony record, they will throw me in jail, fill out an ICE detainer within 48 hours. The ICE officers have got to come, pick me up, and keep me out of country, put me back where I belong. Now, you could have come here legally, but then your visa ran out and created a felonious act. This Irish kid went to college, then it expired, and got beaten up his life. So anyway, so the next question then I said, so if they're here illegally, what happens? He said, we look for the flag on the database system. I said, what if you don't get a flag? Well, whatever it is, if it was destruction of property, they pay restitution, even if they're here illegally, they are instructed to run it. So even if you're here illegally, that's what we're doing at the southern border right now. If you show up, I'm from Ecuador, I walk across, okay, be back, you got a court date in a year and a half, have a nice life in the United States of America. But when they get the hits, that's where it's those that murder, rape, drug possession, of course, illegal alien, you're supposed to have firearms. So that's a felony act right there. So I don't have a resolution to your question. It's taking place. And other than us just trying to catch them in the act of jumping the bus load or plane load or all of that.
So if we do, what can you do with that? You're down an act with America on the plane load.
Well, that's why they're doing it at night and just nefarious about the whole that. Because sometimes I'm traveling across the state and I'll see 6 of these tour buses coming through in the evening time. I mean, almost I think it was Governor Abbott down in Texas said, like, we'll meet the bus and then we'll go ahead and send them to Washington, D.C. and let them get off there.
Well, they had a bill for that this year. They didn't get anywhere. Bruce had that bill. They didn't get anywhere.
There's been a lot of bills that's been killed. It's, I guess I should cover that. It's, how many in here think the government works fast? And of course, for the video, all the hands went up. No, they didn't. It doesn't. It takes time to get things done. You get the hearts and minds and the votes in the House, it can take you 2 years to finally pass a bill and it not move at all in the Senate. After 2 years, you got to start all over. So you can come up with a great concept, but that's what I tell people. I said, at least present the bill and get the idea running around everybody's mind, and maybe later they'll find out, I don't think we're right. My first time meeting a lobbyist, I was at a fundraiser in Nashville. And this was when I was still running for office. And I had 2 questions. Something that concerned me, it was these vape products and Uber drivers. I said, I'm not big on regulation, but I'm thinking there might ought to be some kind of regulation. Of course, now you see Uber drivers beating up people or abusing people and all of that comes more wrong. And then the vape products, we find out what our kids are doing with them, and it's, and we find out it's just bad as them smoking cigarettes. It's like, oh. So there's things that we think about, but that was 8 years ago. And then how long did it take before we're finally talking about it? I mean, now we're just talking about it 6 years later. So a lot of times it's legislation, and that's something that we might ought to keep bringing back up. The sale of Tennessee land to foreign entities. I don't know why the United States is in such a love affair with China. this last year, we finally got, if you don't know anything about the Confucius Centers, the Chinese will spend a bunch of money, go to the universities, and with that, create programs that look good and smell good. But what did we find out they were really doing? Stealing stuff, intellectual property, taking the education stuff from us, taking it back to their country. And come on, we gotta get rid of China. I mean, they're not our friends today.
On immigration, we know the federal government's fairly serious job now. They don't have any intention of doing it. Okay? And I understand that our state can't necessarily fix that, but we've got a Republican supermajority, we have it for years now. And when our state does things like vote, our supermajority votes to give illegal aliens, you voted the right way, you voted against it, I appreciate that. But when they vote to give illegal aliens licenses, when they vote to fund organizations like Catholic Charities, that not only brings in all the refugees, but all the illegals as well, I mean, they can't blame that on DC. We should be demagnetizing, not inviting over. And we should be sticking that bus to DC or Delaware or wherever. But you guys, here's the deal. We've had a Republican supermajority for how many years? About 10 years. They're worthless guys. As a whole, they are worthless. Jay's one of the good ones. But if we don't put some pressure on them, I mean, they are hurting us every bit as much as DC. Because we have to have my
Yesterday, not to cut you off, but into the government operations, it wasn't in the government operations committee, it was a sidebar conversation. Somebody said, why does the Catholic Church have to have a lobbyist? Does Jesus Christ need a lobbyist? And I got thinking about that, I'm like, yeah. And of course, then he just mentioned Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities, and yes, the federal government will pay Catholic Charities to bring these illegals, refugees, whomever, into the state and put them into the system and turn them loose.
And our state gave Catholic Charities $7 million last year.
No, we didn't only get 10 money.
Why not? They gave all the other groups money too.
Now, since we're talking about money, something that just gives me a heart. All right, we weaponized COVID. At the federal level, we gave billions of dollars to all the states as well as the school system. We're finding out what is being taught in our school systems. We were mandating kids have to wear masks in schools. All of a sudden, well, we shut everything down and the kids go home and the kids are learning on the computer and then finally, we, the parents are finding out what they're learning. It's like, oh my gosh. I need to get activated in my child's life because they're not teaching Christian principles in the school. And there's a lot of folks are saying, we need to get our kids out of the school system. We need to homeschool them, private schools, whatever. Of course, that costs money. Of course, you're seeing that on the news the last couple of days with the Education Savings Account. That covers 2 counties, Davidson County and Shelby County. Now, keeping in mind, Memphis and Davidson County, for over 20 years, 20 failing schools in Nashville, 24 failing schools in Memphis. Now, we do the education report card. If we could take those 2 counties out of that report card for failing our kids, Tennessee would be #1 in education achievement in the country. All right. So education, the folks are calling them vouchers, they can call them whatever they are. We passed that bill, we're not taking any money away from any school district. So in Nashville, if my child was there and I moved to a Christian school, the money will be given to the child, thus the parent of that child's education. But that school district keeps the same amount of PPP funding as if the child was still there. We were trying to figure out a way, how do we see if this works? Because we know the teachers union, school district, liberal school districts are going to say, no, you're robbing from the public school system and you ought to be ashamed. My daughter started asking me about it. She's graduated of Boston Gate and senior. She works at Home Depot. Now she just got trying out a new career in property appraisal. But she said, Dad, what is that about? I hear the school about vouchers and all of that. And I said, let me ask you a question. So if the federal government and the state government gives that school money to teach your child, who does that money belong to? Does it belong to the child or does it belong to the school system? No, it belongs to you and your child and the parents. And we need to get back to that. You parents, you grandparents especially, getting back to know what's going on with your grandchildren. And I just pray to God that we are the parents that we need to be for our kids for the future. Now, I'm very
The right things in the school in the first place.
reading, writing, and arithmetic. Getting back to, we just passed the bill, getting back to teaching phonics in school. I don't know why we got away from that, Common Core, all that crap happened before I got there. We pretty well, it's not totally gone, we're still finding nooks and crannies. But what we're finding out is it was 3 years ago, I had had enough. I bolted up on the house floor, held my hand up, and then the speaker called on me. We have about 5 bills, one right after the other. I already said my wife's a teacher. We keep loading garbage on top of the teachers in the classroom. You gotta teach this, you gotta teach that. You only got so many hours in a day. And then we come out and say, well, the kids are being cooped up in the class too long. They need to get out and run around the gym, around the school, and look at football, and whatever. Like, okay, well, and one day I was calling over to Bill Locksmith's job at the high school. It was bad weather outside. The kids were running circles in the gym floor. My wife was standing at the door and said, see what you guys passed? We got to get this done. And I said, I did it. So anyway, we're about the 4th bill on the calendar out of 5. I jump up, speaker calls on me. I said, Mr. Speaker, the members of the House, we have got to stop throwing and loading the teacher's calendar with all of this stuff that they have to do. Where are the parents? We're asking our teachers to be the parents. And I get that. The way the government acts now is that they're not our kids, it's their kids. They just come, they come home or come to your house and sleep, and I can turn right around and send them back off. And I said, I got a problem with that. And the majority leader come over and said, wait a minute, you got some no votes and some blue light votes on that. I said, that wasn't my intent. That was Harold Love. Harold Love, the representative out of Nashville, he had a good piece of legislation come back and listen to. I said, I apologize. Your bill wasn't bad, but it was just it was the straw. It broke the camel's back. So we keep adding this stuff until we get parents. The family movement is parents and grandparents. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of grandparents being there, and they're a wealth of information. You don't already know that. But working with these kids. Now also, I know a lot of our kids are in troubled areas. They're stupid friends, drugs, alcohol, other things. Matter of fact, this Black Lives Movement was being pushed. There was another Baptist church over in Clarksville. I was asked to be on the panel with Sheriff Hughes on Mark Green, with some of the city council members. The church was a black congregation, and the room was packed. And I said, we want to take care of our kids and bring them up right. I wish every single child would grow up on a farm. You get to see life, and get the sorrow of seeing death. The captain on the cow, the horse, whatever. I said, right now, they're bored silly with video games at home, running around thinking it's okay to shoot one another. Or violence. I mean, it's like, I don't have the answer. I really don't. I mean, I know what the problem is with illegal aid. I know what Catholic charities. They were trying to kill my bill. Sanctuary cities. We finally got that passed. I ended up, they sent it to Finance, Ways and Means. There was not a fiscal note on it. They just said the city or county ended up disobeying the law, economic community development grants. It held the buildings, the main streets, and all of that. They were getting it. We ended up money for that 5 years. It's like, whoa, well, it became a real big issue when Mayor Byron's race, they were talking about overturning that law. I mean, I was called racist. I was called all kinds of things. There was connections. There was Catholic charities were fighting the bill as well. But I said, I'm going to tell you what I told the committee. As soon as I said, my story is a 13-year-old boy growing up in Idaho, it went viral and around the world. My wife's best friend, she's up in Kentucky. At the time she was over in Germany, she said, Jay's name is in the newspaper. Oh my, the phone calls I was getting out of California, and this lady, she wanted me to change the story to get her agenda. Anyway, the story goes. As a 13-year-old boy growing up, and of course we were taught hard work, one of my friends in school, his father was the manager for a hay farm, it was apple orchards. And so I said, yeah, I'll go out and work on Saturdays. And as the Hispanic migrant workers were pruning the apple trees, we would break this stuff out to the middle and then they'd hit it with the bushel. Well, there was this little Mexican fellow who would sit right behind, it was one of those short school buses, would sit behind the driver on the bus. And Brian was my friend. I don't know Spanish. Anyway, I'm sure he didn't either. But everybody else on this bus was picking on this little man who was right there. And I said, Brian, now keep in mind, I'm telling you the same story that all these committee members in the video, it's archived. I guess you can go watch the video if you want to. And I said, why are they picking on that little man? He said, because he's a wetback. And I said, what's a wetback? He said, he swims the river to get here, and he's been here, this is his third time. They're not happy. They're here legally, working with a green card for a job. He's here illegally, and if he was not here, one of their family members could have a job. So it's even those that are here on a green card are not being treated right when some big farmer or operator, if it's the concrete guys, the bricklayers, I get it. Sometimes it's hard to find employees. You just pay whoever will show up and do the job. Well, paying them under the table, do they get benefits? No. Do they get paid a fair wage? No. Of course, we're seeing that. It's the mules, the people, mules that bring illegals across our southern border, dying in tractor trailers or just whatever, and put a big price tag on their head, either a man, woman, or child. When they get to this country, when they call in a favor, if they need somebody killed, they expect you to do it. If they need you to run drugs, they need you to do it. And so I told that story, and I said the reason for the story is those that are here legally expects everybody else coming from a foreign country to get here legally as well. Of course, they were stuck on the word wetback. It's like, okay, I'm a 13-year-old learning life, you know. And so this lady called me in California. She's got my cell phone number. It's the same cell phone number you guys called when you lost your keys. You know, that's it. I can't find my phone. This has been out there for 19 years. So I answered the phone. This lady was like, why did you use that word? And I said, it's a true story that I told as a 13-year-old boy that brings home the point that you should be in our country legal. He didn't have to use that word. And I said, so you're telling me that I need to change the story to fit your narrative? Oh, the amount of cuss words that come out of that woman's mouth and you can get the phone slammed down. Like, how nice. But it's silly stuff like that. It's learn the whole sides of the story. I don't have all the answers. Oh, no, I'm just, you know. Now, with that, everybody in this room knows we are challenged. We are challenged in the state. Even with a super Republican majority. Now, can we go back in time? Let's talk about Donald Trump when he was elected to office. Did we have the House? Yes, we did. Did we have the Senate? Yes, we did. What did we have? We had those people that hated Donald Trump, and they didn't do squat. Then the next election rolls over 2 years, and we get Nancy Pelosi. What did the Democrats do for the United States that 2 years? Other than trying to impeach Trump. They named bridges and post offices. Hallelujah. No, you're spending our tax dollars. Do something. And if you're not going to do something, either leave or come on, people, vote them out of office. And And that's the challenge that we're in now. When I got there 8 years ago, 99 members in the House. A third were Democrats, a third were conservative Republicans, the other third were just moderate Republicans. With all of the federal funds that we received because of COVID, the way that we spent money this last year, and I keep talking to our city mayors, county mayors, when you're getting that money, make sure you stay in touch with the comptroller's office, because if you spend it inappropriately, not to federal guidelines, they will want that money back, and the only way that our elected officials can get that back is to raise taxes. Figure out how, so the money's, and here's the challenge, all of that money at the school level, the state, or the county city level has to be spent by 26. In 2026, when that money runs out, it's going to be tough. Through legislation, all of that, it's how are we going to pay for things? Now, my hope is speaking with the treasurer of the state as well as the comptroller, say hopefully our antiquated sewer lines, water lines that are running everywhere, because guess who gets to inherit that debt? Our kids, our grandkids, great-grandkids, kids we don't even know that are going to come into this world will have to pay off that debt. And wouldn't it be nice for a new underground infrastructure that will last another 60 years? That's what they're paying for is just that. What time is it? Should I stop talking?
There's a clock behind you.
8:02. While you're done with me, go ahead. Go ahead.
I talked to you about this before. I don't know much about it, but what common knowledge do you have of 101st coming through, and what kind of impact do you see that? Do you see it being the same impact that I compared to myself does that affected Cumberland City major?
What is it? It escapes me. What is that road number? 374. Okay, so 8 years ago, that was the big conversation because of part of the House District said before, or still is, whatever. But 374, when are they going to finish bringing it across the Cumberland River? The bridge will be over in Palmyra. And they were saying in 2024 it would be completed, but here's the however. When they finally, the degradation of the poor, the current bridge that they're replacing right now, when they downgraded that to the tonnage low limit for the big trucks, and started sending everybody on River Road and around to Zinc Plant Road Bridge, that's this kind of name too, but anyway, they downgraded that and found out that we got a problem. So they put a lot of the 374 on hold, putting all the, like I told you earlier, we could put all the money we want to in bridges and highways in the state of Tennessee, but there's always X amount of workers to get the stuff done. So they took all of the manpower, put it to the bridge that you see now. That will be done this year, and I'm being told 374 will be done in 2026. But to answer the question, your real question is, what is it going to do to the economy? And of course, when Clarksville was complaining 8 years ago about the traffic and everything else, I said, if you just finished 374, that would take a huge load off of Montgomery County. Now keep in mind, since I've been there was LG, the South Korean company making washers and dryers, came, Hankook Tire come there, so the population just boomed. So what I was told 4 years ago, Jay, you're going to lose that western part of Montgomery County because it's growing so fast, and your district's going to change, and the only direction you can move is going west. So I said, okay, well, you guys, the redistricting committee, I said, let me figure it out, just let me know. And then finally, it just, because of COVID, put everything behind schedule. Then they finally came out and they told me, said, we're going to pick up Stewart County, Benton County. We still need 10,000 more people because it's right around 69,000 people who we represent in each of our state houses. You need 10,000 more, so it's kind of a pie wedge out of Henry County. They gave, and this is what I find interesting, they gave me 2/3 of Paris. So it's like a people out of share of Paris. So that means Henry County will have 2 state reps. And so early on in December, this past December, the city and county mayor reached out to me by email and said, we'd like to visit with you because we think that you're probably going to be our next state representative. And they weren't sure that the state splitting up Henry County was a good thing. And when I got there, I said, guys, keep in mind, I'm one of 3 from Montgomery County. So if you're looking for growth, I know a little bit about growth. I mean, from the TCAT schools, teaching of our children, getting a good paying job, moms, dads, grandmother, grandfather, don't you want your kids to stay home? You don't want them moving off to Nashville or Memphis or another. My son's in Ohio right now. I'm hoping he'll make his way back to Tennessee. But if we have good paying jobs, we need to keep our kids and the family nucleus close by and together. So 374, what is that going to do? Oh my gosh. Did I mention that my wife is a county commissioner in Houston County? Am I running over time? Is anybody ready to leave yet?
Not quite, I like this.
So 4 years ago, I come home, and there's a petition laying on the dining room table. It's like, I didn't leave my petition there to run for re-election. And I look at it, there's no signatures on it, and I said, County Commissioners, District 5. My wife's a school teacher. Okay, I get that. It's just like, when is she going to find time to do this? So she gets home from school, and I said, you thinking about being a county commissioner? She said, I'm thinking about it. Now keep in mind, Houston County, before I got elected, they bought the hospital, and we just about had a comptroller of the state come over and take over the books and get the budget figured out for Houston County. So we were in a quandary, new commissioners, new mayor, all of that. I said, you'll do it or not? She said, I probably shouldn't. I said, why? Because they're going to make me mad, and I'll go to customs. I said, well, maybe that's what they need. So, our youngest daughter just got her nerves for a bit. Anna, get in the car, we're going to drive the neighborhood and get signatures. Now, I know a little bit about campaigning. You want my help? My wife said, no, I don't need your help. Come election day, I said, what can I do for you? No. I mean, so if you ever knew Joyce Coleman, that worked at Mitchell's Hardware, back in the back, when she worked there for 30 years, mixing paint and everything else, you know, my wife Vicky's just like Miss Joyce. So I stepped back, and then on election day, we're standing there in the court square, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, I cannot believe how many votes I got to be county commissioner. So now the question is, what are you going to run against? So at the end hour, she finally got another petition signed, turned in, and she's got competition, but I guess come August, we'll find out if she's still a county commissioner. But that night, we got a new county mayor, we got half of the new county commissioners. I was just contacted by the Attorney General's office today because Congressman used to be Senator Mark Green, and I worked trying to help the hospital. We were so far in debt, and anyway, we ended up getting some public funds to put into the hospital to keep it open for the citizens of Houston County. So the county owned it. We got a medical team, group, whatever, that they want to sell it to, but it has to be approved by the Attorney General's office because public funds are in there. We got word today that Houston County could sell it. Hallelujah. We have no business owning or trying to run a hospital as a county. And with that, the only alternative, if they would not allow that to happen, was Houston County, because of financial costs, we're going to have to close our hospital. Now we get to sell it, and it gets to stay open. So I'm very proud of the county commissioners and the county mayor in getting that done. What did I do? Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything in the legislative process regarding medical marijuana?
Oh, have you heard?
No. That's what I'm asking.
Have you heard the federal level? Okay, medical marijuana in Tennessee. So the subcommittee for joint operations for health met that morning before our afternoon meeting where I was talking about. We established a task force, so there's a medical marijuana board set up in the state of Tennessee. So they've got their directors, commissioners, or whatever they're called, the team that's going to be looking into all of this, which was the first step. When I get home and I hear on the news, Congress has got a bill doing stuff with marijuana for the whole United States. So look that up and see where that's at. And I just caught ear of they were talking about it. I don't know who the sponsors, if they're Democrat, Republican. However, I will say, if you're growing hemp or using any hemp products in the state of Tennessee, it's because of this. Okay? I passed the bill, I'm saying, hey, it's more than just CBD. It's clothing, it's rope. Patagonia is making industrial workwear. I mean, the fibers of the hemp plant are just that tough. They said, it ought to be a second option. We're not breaking any laws. You can't be over 0.3% THC, so you're not getting high off of it. And after we passed the bill, and they said, well, you can't feed it to your animals, I said, you got to be crazy. We could take and eat it all we want, but if the herd or the seed cake, when they squeeze the oil out, the CBD oil out of that seed, it leaves a seed cake, which is high in protein, omegas, and high in fiber. And I said, in our law, you couldn't feed it. I couldn't feed it to my cat. I said, well, this doesn't make any sense. They said, no, because it's adulterated. Because that's when I went toe-to-toe with Farm Bureau. I said, and this was a committee, and I said, how is it adulterated? Well, pesticides, herbicides. I said, no, there's no pesticides, herbicides. The label will be used on him. That's not going to work. Well, it's got THC in there, and you go get the cows high. And I was like, oh my gosh. It come out with the oil. And I just so happened to did my research. North Carolina State sent off some samples to a third-party lab and said there's no THC left in it because it all came out with the oil. So there was just, the protein of the plant, fiber of the plant, and the omega-3s, 6s, and 9s that was left. And it was like, this is a good food source, better than soybean. So we got that passed. But the reason I say that is to say this: medical marijuana. Every time we do a poll, it rates real high. Their citizens, loved ones, some with death's bed with cancer. It will help them. It will put them in a comfort area. In other words, starving to death. Yes, it's an appetite stimulant. It'll help them eat. But we find those with PTSD, those with Crohn's disease. I mean, there's so many things. If we would allow medical marijuana to take place, I'm all for it. Now, I grew up in Idaho with my dad's brothers who were a bunch of hippies. Like Mama said, they weren't worth killing. They'd go out and get smoke the dope, drink the beer, the whiskey, and they weren't productive citizens. I just hate to say that, but that's the truth. Now, keeping in mind, the 70s, the THC level was 5%, what you get 10%. Woo, they got hot stuff in Colorado, it's 38%. So they got to be careful with it. But it's interesting how many states who said, forget you, and Dave, to your point, here's where we notify. The federal government, here's the law, and the state says, forget about your law. What is there, 31 or 33 states now that allow medical marijuana, but only about half of those are okay with recreation. So it's a huge conversation. I think part of the reason Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, pharmacists. So he's listening to the pharmacies. There's synthetic marijuana in all the dispensaries across the state. Don't you dare grow and use it for sale. So he's been the roadblock as far as medical. So with us starting this new committee of doctors, everything else discussing, hopefully we will move into those areas where those young people with seizures, all of that, we will be able to get them the medical cards and the medical marijuana that they need for a better life. Yes, ma'am.
Is anything being done to ensure and preserve voter integrity?
Oh, yeah. As far as voter integrity, things going on in the state. The Heritage Foundation filed a report that said Tennessee was number 3 out of all the states having the most secure election system. Now, we passed a bill that would move us away from that, and I was very supportive of that bill. But what we found out, once again, it was, I said something about Democrats and judges and chancery officers and DAs, all that. Anyway, when they weaponized COVID going into that primary, allowing, they were telling everybody you could just do a mail-in ballot. We say, oh my gosh, the corruption from that, from the Secretary of State, the elections director, and saying, we still had a good turnout in person in spite of it in the rural areas. But we know we don't have a lot of votes in rural areas compared to Nashville or Memphis. And so we finally got the court, unfortunately, after that time to throw that out, putting us back to secure voting the last November election. But here's what we did. So, ever since then, Wilson County was talking about how things were corrupted. So their election cycle for that county, because so many people believe that the integrity was lost, was the auditing of all the machines going in before election started, and then as soon as early voting cuts off, then they will audit the machines again. I mean, it's a heavy duty, a lot of time and money to be spent auditing all of this to find out just how bad our election process is in the size of Wilson County. Something else, a trend that was started. Now, how many of you are familiar if I said that the Zuckerberg bucks, and what the billions he was giving to other states? And what he was saying is, well, because it's paper ballot, the absentee ballots and all of that, he gave this money to different groups, and the different groups, they didn't live in those states, would come in and say, okay, we're going to help you with this, and we got all this money, you don't have to pay us nothing, and we're going to take care of all these paper ballots. And that's when they started just packing in crates of already filled out ballots and running through the machines. It's like, oh my gosh. So we caught wind of that. So if our election offices cannot receive any funds from anybody, and then if we find out if you are one of the office employees, if any of that takes place, you immediately go to jail. We're not screwing around. You leave our elections alone. And then there's the other provision that come into place is more contesting an election. So right after the election takes place, there's the process. If you think something went wrong, working right with the Secretary of State's office, we make the complaint, go in, re-audit the records, and all of that. I'm going to ask a question because I don't know. In Houston County, you go up and it's the digital screen, and then it's a touch screen, so you touch everything, and then you hit print, and that prints off the ballot. And then you walk to another machine, and you feed that in, so the paper ballot is kept. So a lot of people say, we just need to use paper ballot, forget all the digital stuff. Now these machines are not hooked to the walls or any. In other words, there's not information going to Nashville or going to, some of these, what was the information that the election data was being sent to a foreign country and saying, whoa, it just does not make any good sense. Stewart County, what kind of system do you all use?
Just the screen, just the screen. They don't burn out the ballot too when you're not. This thing that you're at the end, it's on. It comes out on the roll at the end. So the rest of the printer, like a hand.
Okay. Because part of what we passed and partly answered a portion of your question is the paper ballot backup. And we passed legislation, and of course, we just finished in April, so trying to get them before now. But it seemed like there's a timeline, if it's all counties, the state funding will help, but make sure it's more similar to what Houston County, the way that we're voting is for that secure paper ballot backup. So if there's ever a contested race or whatever, they can go back and recount those votes and actually have
One we got, it does bring out on the paper. But it goes, it stays with the machine that goes to the election.
Right. So I'm curious on how they read that. You know, that front of the receipt paper, I know, this is good card to stop. I mean,
So it's just like, like getting gas.
I'll be curious on that. Okay, am I done yet?
I've got a question about ARPA funds, but I'll wait till this is over.
One-on-one, okay.
And I'm gonna fix the brain on ARPA funds.
That's the worst thing that ever happened to me. You got a question? I see your eyeball roll. What do you think about something? Yeah, well, I'll be around for another 2 years, so I'll give you my phone number at my office. You can find it on here at 615-741-7098. And it's a lot of times when people call, they got a question or a concern, I will actually ask you to send me an email because I will start a paper trail. As a state representative, different departments have liaisons. They will not take a phone call from you, only from me or another state rep. In other words, you say, we got to get on this. So I get quick reaction, just like the Attorney General's office with Houston County. Finally, the mayor, he needed to not hear anything out of the Attorney General's office. And I'm not bragging, but when you do your job, things happen really quickly. So we reached out to the Attorney General's office to find out what the hiccup was. And then finally, they got all the paperwork they needed in 45 days. They just like that. But anyway, contact me if you need something. If you want to come to Nashville and visit, if you want to tour the capital, there's so many things. Bring the kids. Yes, I'm a temporary spot holder. I'm waiting for the next man or woman in line who wants to run for state rep. But I know, and you probably feel the same way, you're standing on the sideline of this game of life, and you're watching your elected official run the ball back and forth across the field, fumbling all the time and saying, my gosh, this person does not hold my values. And I don't like it. Instead of going to war with guns, we go to battle box. So that's why it's important to get people to get out to the battle box. So thank you for allowing me to speak. It's good to meet with all of you. I'm here if you need me. Thank you.
For any of you that would like to be notified of future GOP meetings in the county, we have a clipboard up there to sign, give us your phone number and your email address. You want to have it in all of them. With that, is there anything to be on? Please.